Hi everyone, if you're watching this, you are on our This Valorant Life channel page, and we want to just take this opportunity to talk a little bit about our TVL Tent, which is our This Valorant Life community. And I'm going to throw it over to Adam in terms of what we're hoping to accomplish with this community.
So this community is mainly a place for people like you guys that are trying to improve at the game to have people around you that are similar. I know when I was trying to improve at this game, it felt pretty lonely, and you really don't have like a space to, I guess, differentiate yourself from the general Valorant community. And the general Valorant community, I think, has a lot of different parts of the game that we don't really enjoy. There's a lot of toxicity, there's a lot of cope, there's a lot of encouraging bad habits, and not really just, playing the game how we think it deserves to be played. And our community is about respecting the game, respecting yourself, and respecting others. So if you think that sounds good, then I think you'll be a good fit for the community.
And the community is a paid community, but we are not doing this to enrich ourselves. So what we're going to be doing is that the paid community is $5 USD per month. And that goes through Ko-Fi or Coffee. I'm not sure which one it is. There's a link in the channel description, and there'll be a link below as well. We're going to pool all those funds together, and when it reaches $800, we're going to actually create kind of a scholarship where we're going to have people apply, and the community is going to help us select who will win the scholarship and get to work with Adam through one of his coaching programs. And so that's one way we think we can take what this community is doing for good, give it to someone who may not otherwise be able to afford it, and is really intentional and excited about it. And so if this sounds like something you'd be excited about, we'd love for you to be a part of it. You can join us, ko-fi.com/thisvalorantlife. Thanks, guys. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 45 of This Valorant Life. In this episode, we are doing the map deep dive into your favorite Valorant weirdest map, Fracture. The map that nobody knows how to play. We're going to be diving into that today. So with that, we're going to start on attack, Adam. But maybe even before we start an attack, I think we need to have a discussion around the just general structure of this map and what it means for us as players and how we think about the map. So how is this map different, and how does that change how you play?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess we could talk about like what's traditional. So traditional maps have like 3 lanes generally. So you have like A site, mid site, or like mid, and then B site. That's not really the case on this map because there is no mid unless you include mid as spawn. So that's number 1. There's no mid, which means you can't really take that much space on defense. Now, the thing that makes this even more strange is there's 4 lanes in total, but because there's no mid, attackers have the opportunity to split every single site off of barrier, right? So defenders are inherently stuck between left and right side, like off barrier, which makes it really difficult to choose which side to fight. It's a coin flip. So like, let's pretend like they're coming B and you want to contest B. On a map like Ascent, you would set up to hold B main, or you would turtle on the bomb site, but you don't really have to worry about market split. On this map, if you contest arcade and they go all B main, you're kind of screwed, and vice versa. But then if you stay on the bomb site, which we'll talk about in a second, you don't really have that many spots to play anyways.
So it's almost like, if we're to think about it, it's almost like a map where the attack side owns mid as a default. And because they own mid, every time they hit a site, they are always they have the option not to, of course, but they always have the option to split the hit on the site, right? Which is more powerful than just hitting through one choke. And so that's pretty different than every other map. As a defender, then, does that mean the most viable option is to try to push out into mains, or because I think we've seen people do that. You can do crunches like through here,
right?
Oh, no,
like an arcade plus dish crunch.
Yeah, you can do an arcade plus dish crunch. Oh my gosh, I'm still on that. Okay, like this.
Yes.
There we go. But you don't often see crunches on the other side.
That's true. So you're right in the sense that the default response would be for defenders to get active.
Yeah.
The problem with that is it can be difficult to coordinate, especially in ranked play.
Yeah.
And if you're getting active on 2 lanes. So let's pretend, maybe I'll just throw some characters on here. Let's pretend you're trying to crunch that arcade side. Throw in 3 cloves. So you have 3 here, and then you have, I don't know,
just a sea of cloves.
you have 2 players on the other side, but then attackers, they're split like 4 on this side, and then like 1 on the other side. In which case, it's impossible to figure out the numbers game, right? Like it's literally a coin flip. So even if you did want to pinch this, you might not have the correct numbers, or there's the possibility that if you do pinch this and there's 1 player on this side, all they have to do is take the rope, and then these 4 players on the other side of the map just speed up, and then now they have a free bomb site. So it's, number 1, like not guaranteed. Number 2, if you make the wrong read and the other players happen to be positioned somewhere else, they just speed up, and then you have a retake simulator. And what's worse about that is if they decide to go A and you're retaking from drop, it's almost immediately lost, because
retaking from drop is the worst.
It's impossible. And they will also have spawn priority. So when these players come back into B and they're going to be spawn, these players are already going to be up sands and taking sands.
Yeah.
So it sucks for defenders.
Okay. Okay. With that, then, why don't we go back into the attack side?
Sure.
And let's start with what would be like a useful comp for us to base our discussion around.
So Teo's in the game. I think he's going to be pretty popular. But before we even get into that, let's start with controller. Brimstone and Clove are going to be your main 2 choices. Now, I think in ranked, you're probably going to see Clove the most, but Brimstone used to be the meta pick here.
Why was Brimstone the meta pick? Because you could have the 3 smokes?
The 3 smokes, and the fact that you could farm ultimates, and the fact that Killjoy used to be meta, so you would need the Brim ult to break the Killjoy ult.
Got it.
Because otherwise you wouldn't be able to break it. So he was really good for a lot of reasons. But Clove might be picked just because Clove is ranked character. Astra used to be seen on this map. I don't think Astra is bad on this map, but for the sake of this, I don't think we consider Astra.
Okay.
We definitely throw in a Breach, because that's going to be the meta pick.
Yep.
And then for Duelist, it's almost always going to be a Raze if you have a Raze player. You could substitute this with Jet, but it's like Raze is definitely the better Duelist on that map, in my opinion.
Okay.
And then after that, normally it's Killjoy. And I do think Killjoy is really good. I'll just show the ultimate. If you go underpass and then you ult here, it gets the entirety of B bomb site.
Yep.
And it's unbreakable unless you Brim ult. You can't even break it with Aftershock anymore because they nerfed Breach Aftershock. So Killjoy ult's really good. I believe Teho can just click on his iPad and break it though, which means that you might not see Killjoy. So if Killjoy is not going to be picked, then the next likely candidate would be Chamber, because Chamber's util doesn't really get broken, and the op is pretty good on this map. So for the sake of this conversation, we're going to throw Killjoy out the window. We're going to throw in Chamber, and then we're also going to throw in Teho. Now, personally, I think we might see KOs, but in ranked, it's really not that important. But something like this. Now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, in my experience on this map, because everyone starts on this side, there's almost a predisposition to people going B main and A main, versus a lot of the times especially in low elo games, like it's almost like this side doesn't exist.
Right.
Does that affect how you think about it, or is that more just like a feature of low elo?
I mean, if it does affect how you would approach the map, because if you are only going to play on one side, you want to go on the side that you can split. So like if you only go B main, you can't split through arcade as well. But if you go all A main, at least you can start splitting your site hit from Sands and A main. So A main would be the more attractive choice if you're only playing on one side. But the general rule of thumb to approach attack is you always want to split. So ideally you always have a player on this top side, whether it be 1, 2, 3, it doesn't really matter, but that will allow you to at least slow walk up dish or slow walk up arcade while your teammates are taking the other space.
Okay. When you think about this map, is there a default that exists, or is this not really a map because of its structure that you would be defaulting?
Normally, like if you could default and take the space guaranteed every single round, it would be A main.
Yep,
it really depends on the comp. So if your comp is stronger for the A main fight, similar to Lotus, you just go A main every round and take A main.
So A main is like Rubble on Lotus.
Yeah, very similar, because if you do take A main control, you get the orb, and it splits off into 2 lanes, very similar to Lotus as well. So you would start A main. If the enemy team is actually defending it well, just like Lotus, you actually wouldn't start here. You would, in Lotus, you would do a C mount default, get the orb, and then reset. So what that might look like for this map, you have a lot of options, but the most common one is to get the orb B main, and then retake arcade through underpass. Maybe you have one out late here. So you basically get B main control, go underpass, take arcade, and you take both orbs on this side. Or you just take drop, and then you would hold the rest of the map. And taking drop is like very passive. Like you probably won't get many duels there, but if the drop orb tends to be pretty free. So if you're on an eco round, I would say bias towards a drop default. If you're on a gun round, bias towards like a mixture of an arcade B main default, if the A main isn't possible to take.
Okay. What does, maybe before we get into a typical attack round, when you think about pistol rounds, what comes to mind for you in terms of how to approach it on the attack side?
You almost always want a death ball.
Yeah.
Like you want to do a 4-1. So the most common 4-1s on this map is 4 arcade, 1 B main. So maybe I'll just put the number 4 here. 4 arcade, 1 B main.
Why would you do 4 there and then 1 B main versus the opposite?
Because arcade splits up into 2 lanes. So if you take arcade, you can now go tower, or you can go here. So you need more numbers.
Okay.
But also the other reason is B main tends to get like util dumped. It's kind of hard to get out of B main. So
it's a pretty terrible choke.
It does
feels
suck.
It feels like there's this scene. This might be too old for you. Have you seen the movie The Rock before?
I've not.
Okay. There's this scene where like they all come out of the shower in this manhole, and then they basically get shot from all sides.
Yeah.
And they kind of know they're all gonna die, but they just do it anyways. And like that's kind of what it feels like when you're entering through B main. It feels like you can shot. It feels like the moment you exit that smoke, you can get shot from like 7 different places.
It's pretty uncomfortable to go out B main. So yeah, 4 arcade.
Okay.
1 B main, or if you're going A side, you normally go 4 A main and 1 drop. You can technically do a 5 here, especially if you have brim smokes, then you can just smoke off sands, spawn, and drop.
Yeah.
But most of the time, you probably still just want 1 player late drop.
So what does a typical, maybe we're already on the side of the map. What does a typical B hit look like on a gun round?
So similar in the sense that you will almost always do a 4-1 or at least a 3-2. You won't do a 5-man. So typically the agents that will go on the B main side is going to be one of your smokes characters or a sentinel, because they aren't really required in terms of taking util. Now if I'm Brimstone, I like to go with the team just to throw the stim beacon down. But in this case, let's just say that let me get rid of the clove real quick. So let's just say the Brim, like everyone is playing together and the chamber is playing alone for the most part.
Okay.
Your typical hit is going to be using util to take arcade. So that might be like an early flash by the breach. Some people early stun, but I want to save the stun for tower. So you might early flash here. You're going to get scale, like get close, peek all of these angles. Basically the flash is just to stop this off angle here from the chamber, because this one is kind of like deadly. So flash pushes the chamber off here. As we scale on the site, your Brim is going to do standard smokes, which is going to look like Gen Smoke and Canteen Smoke. The wrong way to do the canteen smoke is deeper and then giving this player a corner to play in. So just make sure you actually put it out so that the smoke will cover that corner. You don't want that corner there. And then now it's just all about taking tower and taking the site at the same time. So normally what happens is your breach will either do one of two stuns. One is from this corner. I can't actually drag that from there, so let me start here first. So this is one stun. This one is good because it gets the box, behind the box, and the close player in tower. Like let's say the Cypher has a shorty. That gets hit. And this raise will now double satchel into tower while checking the bottom, and the stun allows for the raise to do that. The other stun that you might see is this corner, and it's for the vertical line into tower here, which means that you might have to manually clear the box as raise. And if this player is playing shorty in that corner, it might not hit him because he might go like a little bit forward and dodge it.
I see.
So that's kind of annoying, but this is basically it. You want to go arcade, util to clear the box and to take tower. Whether or not you have enough util and you do it successfully, that's kind of the game plan here. And then from here, you send 2 players into tower and 2 players into main. If the defenders respond very, very quickly to the arcade split and they smoke off arcade split, you might leave 1 player here and send majority into tower while this B main guy kind of walks up and gets into the smoke. And then what this player in B main will do is they're looking for timings off of minimap. So let's say like they run through and like they see on minimap that, you know, there's a player that just ran out of the canteen smoke. Now this guy's going to pounce and then go for that kill. It also allows the B main player to make comms on whether or not they're aggressing B main. So, or aggressing A main. So kind of like they're playing info gathering here. So a common thing for defenders to do is smoking here to contest B main space or deep. Or if they do the A main smoke, maybe this sentinel player will catch all of that. And then their job is to translate that info over to the arcade players. So if any of these 3 things happen, they're fighting A main, they're fighting B main, these guys arcade can feel a little bit more comfortable to speed up. But if this guy doesn't get contested at all, and the A main, like they don't use breach stun or, you know, whatever smoke on A main, then it might actually be an arcade plus dish pinch or something like that. So cross map info here is big. I'm kind of getting a little bit complicated here, but just know that this guy gathers info, relays it to the team, and then the 4 players kind of group up and util death ball the other side.
And how worried are you or not worried are you about a player playing on top of this box? Let me circle it. Like
top gen. Top gen is very difficult to play against. I check it literally every single time I go into the bomb site because it's kind of actually one of the only positions you can play that doesn't get utiled. So I personally check it every single time I go in.
So if there's a raise, a jet, or an omen, you need to be checking that spot.
Or chamber. Chamber is very popular as well.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So yeah, check that box. Sage is actually kind of played too. So
yes. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so that's your standard B hit.
So you go there, standard B hit. Okay, you've taken site, you've cleared. And I guess I want to point out just how much util goes into tower and how important taking tower is, right? Like, I think sometimes players can walk around tower and just hope it's clear, but it's kind of like U-Haul in bind or hookah. You need to clear it out because to not clear it out is such a pain for getting a bomb down or getting a post plant. What are the ideal post plant locations? So obviously there's the default in the corner,
right? So slant.
Yeah. And then where would you be planting if you have an open bomb site?
Okay, so it depends on where you're setting up. So if you're playing for a B main post, you'd plant into this corner here so that you can see it from B main. And the reason why this plant is good is because you can molly line up from B main and you can breach aftershock from underpass. So your B main like spam post plant used to be pretty good here. If you're not playing a B main post plant and you're playing on site, slant is going to be your most common plant because you can see it from tower. And if you're playing on site, you will almost always have tower control, which means that as long as you hold tower, you can at least like deny bomb a little bit from there. The other somewhat common plant spot is in this corner. The reason why this one is used is just because if defenders do a good job of denying plant, this is kind of the one that is like off plant, like off centered a little bit, and it doesn't really get utilled. So you can kind of get that one down.
Okay.
But you can't really play it from anywhere. So
You have to play it from outside.
yeah. So post plant positions, almost always you want to have a player slant, but just know that if you are the slant player, it sucks, because if they save their util and then they start the retake and then util dump you, you're not going to be able to get out. So this actually might be a position that you put your chamber in, and he has like his TP back in main or something, and then he can like play that, take a fight, and then TP back out or something.
Yeah.
So that might be ideal. Let's just throw the chamber here. Then your other player is almost certainly going to be tower, getting ready to fight off of them. And this is, I guess, passive positions. Like I think what is a little bit more common is someone will go aggressive by close gen here. And then now, as a result, this Brimstone can play a little bit forward, and this chamber is going to be playing a little bit more open. So you could posture pretty aggressively, especially if you have a resmoke from Brim. You only use 2. You will probably resmoke Canteen, and then everyone just has eyes on Gen and plays off the raise. That would be ideal.
How are you balancing? Because we're a post plant, and unlike usual, we aren't just looking towards CT. Because someone could easily be coming drop, or they could be coming on this side. I don't know what it's called.
Yeah, they could
How
fight.
do you orient yourself in a post plant to be playing around these multiple directions?
So the right answer, I think, is that it doesn't exist, because you can't have good flank protection for both of these lanes.
Sure.
It's really difficult. Maybe if you play Cypher, your trip might be long enough after because I believe last time Cypher was played on this map, the trip range wasn't long enough, so it might be possible now. But regardless, it's very difficult. You just have to know that what flank is open. So if the arcade / drop flank is open, your tower player is going to be checking it. So let's say Teo's tower, he's going to check it, or the player behind the box, they're going to check it. If B main is open, then ideally someone's looking B main, but it is really difficult, to be honest, and that's one of the avenues that defenders can use to get back into the game, is flanking. But yeah, it is difficult.
Okay.
But if you posture aggressively, you're almost always going to have an arcade player, you have a gen player, and then everyone's playing forward on the bomb site. This is an aggressive post. If you can't play close, then what you want to do instead, in my opinion, is just play heavy arcade side with potentially like one player on the site or B main side, and then like players stalling tower. Because what this will do is, if they don't smoke off arcade, then you can kind of play off of your arcade player's contact when they start coming out. So that can work pretty well. On top of that, if the defenders use this smoke for the retake, you can just get inside of it, and then when the tower players get contact, you can try to push through together.
Okay.
So arcade is a heavy power position in the post.
That's great. Why don't we move over to the A site then?
Sure. So first things first, you take a main control. Most commonly it's just breach stun on this lane, and then your teammates will kind of just run up with it. You pretty much only use the breach stun, and then from this point, this is where additional util is used. So your breach might come around and flash at deep angle, so you can kind of swing, or they might flash through sands. It depends on which one you want to take first. If you're doing like a super quick split, what you might do is you might stun and then send a lot of people out sands, and then the Brim will drop smokes. Let's just say this and this, and then now the breach and the Brimstone would kind of go up main together.
Can we back up one sec?
Sure.
How are you thinking through, if you're calling the strat or you're the Brim, how are you thinking through whether to call sand split, or whether the split is just through A main and you smoke off CT and sand?
Yeah. So if I'm being honest, it's more of so just depending on how strong their sand hold is. So the default should be, let's go and take sands first, because if you do take sands, the benefits of taking sand, it stops the flood, right? Because you're inherently closer to the smokes. And number two, you have sight lines on the player playing top site and bottom site. And if you don't have sight lines on them, then they're kind of stuck playing right next to the cover. So you just eliminate a ton of positions that they can play at, which makes your site take a lot better. But if they have a really good sands hold, which normally looks like immediate counter smoke here, or there's like a trap set of like a breach is also like enemy breach is playing sands, and then like they counter the push with their util, and then you just get hard delayed. So normally what happens is like you take sands and then they counter util, and then you just go back to main and just hit from main. So in a way you almost bait the util a little bit, but that's probably getting higher elo. So start sands, you get utiled off, or if they have a good sands hold, then you just go main. And I quickly want to talk about the smokes. So the ones you propose are the more standard ones, and these are very good. If you're playing Brimstone, what you can do, because this top ledge angle still exists, is you can throw your third smoke on top of the box to one-way it to get rid of that angle.
Got it.
Now what I propose instead, and I tested this in a custom, is if you one-way this box and then you put another smoke on the floor like this, you actually block off all of the angles. You just have less space. But if you're playing Clove, this actually might be the better alternative because you only have 2 smokes and not 3. And then you would go all main, you might have 1 late drop.
And I could see that being kind of an eco strategy too.
Yeah. Or if you have like really good ults, force the bomb down, all run back main. So I guess this talks about post plant, but this is the most common plant, is in this corner. You very easily spammable in main. And if you have like breach ult, in this case now you also have Teho. So you could play a really mean A main post plant.
In each of these scenarios, both B post plant and A post plant, is there any benefit of trying to go into CT?
So not really, but the thing is, when I was looking at some like Knights VODs when he was playing in ranked, and he was like the rank 1 player for last act and the act before, he was playing hyper aggressive in his post plant. So when he was going B, he would take the CT smoke. If he was going A, he would sit right next to the smoke, and then when the smoke fades, he would try to get that kill. Like he was playing pretty much just to contest the hit. And that might just be a product of Clove not having mollies and stuff like that. Or maybe he thinks he has a timing. But it was very interesting for me to see that he's actually going for these fights, because it wasn't really that common before. But I do see the value in it. Specifically this canteen fight, if you're really early, you can kind of catch the rotates here, which is kind of annoying. But otherwise, no, I don't think it's very common to take spawn and peek into spawn.
Okay. Is there anything on the post plant? What does the location ideally look like? Are most of you A main and one's on site and one's drop, or do you even just you try to get the guy out of drop?
So I think if you leave a player at drop, it becomes really annoying for the defenders. So your drop player can kind of argue like never to leave drop, which is like a weird thing to say. Maybe you take the site and then jump back into drop, and then now your drop player can also clear the flank, which I think is pretty useful. So if you leave a player at drop for the most time, it could be good, and then you put a lot of pressure on them. So I think that's a really good position to have here, especially if you have an open plant, which I didn't even talk about, but an open plant for A main and drop, now it becomes really insane. But regardless, drop player is good. Other post plant positions you might consider would be this top site angle, and then you can kind of hold like an off angle on them scaling out spawn. And then the rest of the players, your bomb planter might actually not be able to leave, so they might be stuck here. Yeah. And then now you might have like 2 players main, or you might have like a sands player and a main player. And this is somewhat typical of a post plant. Your sands players are going to be playing somewhat passive. They're going to contest the guys coming out tower, but then they're not going to overfight into the spawn guys. They might just like fight the tower guy and then fall back into main. And then once they are here, they're just going to play off of teammates' contact here.
When they're fighting tower, where are they fighting from? Like, are they fighting from underneath, or are they trying to hold it from door?
So both normally. So let's actually put the Raze over here. If your Raze is your sands player, most of the time they actually just end up by this little box here. And then now this player is just kind of like playing tucked from the spawn guy rotating. And then the A main player is going to be your breach or your brim, depending on who plants. And then they're just going to like wait outside the door, look at mini map, and then open the door and peek to trade the Raze basically.
Got it.
But you don't want to be the guy holding tower from main. I feel like unless you have an op, it's kind of a bad idea.
Yeah, it feels bad. Okay, what are some good eco strategies on attack?
So I think the one that immediately comes to mind is like fast sand split. So I talked about this A main stun, but what you can do instead, if you're playing like a Raze or a Jet or even a Neon, maybe I should talk about the defender counter stun. So the counter stun for the defenders is somewhere in tower like this. Maybe you can get the straight line here. But if you're playing Raze, Jet, or Neon, you can actually get past the stun. I think it's a little bit harder for Raze, but just pretend like you're jet dashing or you're Neon running. You can make it past the stun, and then you're basically just insta rushing the sands guy. And if you're doing that on eco, you might just insta flash or insta stun as breach, and then you might get that kill. So I think that one's really good. You could pair this up with a main smoke, so you don't have to worry about the deep guy, because it's kind of hard to fight that guy with bad guns. And you're just trying to overwhelm Sands guy. If they do have an A main guy and you can't close this distance because you have bad guns, you basically just swarm spawn, or like kind of just occupy this space. It allows you to reset if you want, but you're just creating chaos in their spawn. Maybe get a gun or something like that, but I think that's a pretty good eco strat.
Okay.
Other eco strat you might consider is actually just jumping out drop like maniacs. It actually kind of works decently well if you have an A main smoke, and then you have your kind of like spawn smokes, like your standard smokes here, and you can kind of swarm the site a little bit. So it's not that bad. You could get away with doing the cross smokes that we talked about earlier, jump out of drop and take site like that. If they're playing on site, they're definitely going to get overwhelmed. But you can get some creative closing distance plays with the eco here.
And any eco strats that come to mind for B?
Not really. I mean, if you're playing Viper, the one that comes to mind would be, you would have, so the old Viper wall used to go across arcade like this. You can do it off barrier. And as you can kind of tell here, it cuts off the sight line from sight. So you would pair that with like your standard smokes, which means now that like the players in spawn and the players on site can't see anything, which means you kind of like walk out and fight the guys like in between. And then now you can make the decision to jump through your Viper wall or jump into the spawn smokes. But the most common way to do this, actually, you would take the canteen smoke because it's the closest thing to you. But if you don't have Viper, it's kind of hard to do, to be honest. So yeah, I would probably stay away from B on eco rounds, unless you take tower, I guess. Tower seems good.
Okay. Is there anything we didn't talk about on attack you think we should talk about?
I think we talked about everything. I just want to emphasize 2 points. Number one, there's 4 ult orbs. So there's one B main here, there's one arcade here, there's one drop here, and then there's one A main here. Don't forget that. Like, that is a huge objective to go for. And the second point to emphasize on attack is don't get lazy and just 5-man. You really want to be splitting sites. So if you see your 4 teammates go somewhere and you're the duelist, just go on the other side and just split. It's typically worth it, unless the enemy team's just not using any util at all, or their comp just doesn't actually have any stopping power. Like if you're playing against Jet, Reyna, Clove, Chamber, and someone else that doesn't have stopping power, you could probably get away with 5-manning. But if you're playing against a Breach, a Brimstone, even just those 2 agents, you're going to get stuck. So split the sites.
So
okay, cool.
I guess we don't really flip the map here. So if we move over to defense, where are we often playing as a default setup?
Okay, so it's almost always 3. I hate that the map is flipped this way. Let's just keep it.
Let's just keep it this way. Yeah.
Yeah. So 3 defenders on A and 2 defenders on B is going to be the most common. So that means that your sentinel is going to be on B with a +1.
Yeah.
Normally that's going to be actually your smokes player is playing spawn rotate. Let's just throw the brim here. And what your setup might look like is chamber trip on one of the lanes, and then the chamber kind of like fighting another lane. So just pretend like this is your setup. I actually don't know. Your TP will probably be for top gen. You take your shot, you leave. Your Brimstone is playing for rotates, and then you have 2 players contesting A main. For this example, let's put Breach and Raze, and then your last player here, whoever he is, Fades would play drop and then get early haunt info. Teho might, I don't even know where Teho would play, but just pretend Teho is your drop player. But normally your third is going to be playing drop to some extent.
Okay.
But this drop player is the float player, to be fair. They could fight A main, they could beef up your B setup, but the standard, I guess, should be A main contestation and your Senti on B to cover the flank.
If you've got 3 people fighting A main, when is it okay to just leave drop unattended?
It's really, really common because you can kind of just hold the guy jumping out from multiple angles. So if you have like A main players, right, let's just put Teho here, and they're coming out of drop. Now this tower player and the sands player can turn around and fight that, and this guy A main can fall back in the site. And now these guys coming out of drop are kind of in a weird pinch anyways. So it's kind of normal to not actually have a drop player, which means that attackers can kind of walk up for free. But it is good to sprinkle in some rounds where you play drop to make them respect it. Oh, I was just gonna say, your standard A fight is like breach stun combined with like duelist running up normally, and then your brim ideally does like a smoke deep, and then you had now established A main control. And once you have that, your Raze will grab the orb or hold the line, and you have your breach playing anti-flash with his flash out, ready to counter their smoke push.
And that's if you're trying to fight for A main control. Are you happy to do that brim smoke to control A main off rip, even if you don't know people are there?
Yes. So even if you don't use util, it denies the lurker out there from walking in, which is really, really nice. And it basically just gives you a little bit more peace of mind to play this side of the map a little bit slower as a defender. So you will see that smoke very frequently. There are cases where you don't want to do it, but I do think for the most part, like 80% of the time, you just throw that smoke, because it's good to, it's kind of like the Ascent A main smoke. Like it's good to condition that because you rarely push past that point anyways as a defender.
So in this typical setup, maybe we'll start B again, assuming we're starting from this position. How are you defending the site? Are you willing to die on site, or are you, because of the geometry and people splitting, you're generally trying to get one kill and falling off?
Depends on their ults. Okay, so if they have a brim ult, which commonly uses for tower, so that you can't play tower. If they have
There's a
breach
lineup
ult,
for tower where you can hit almost all of tower, right?
yes, yeah, you can pretty much rim ult all of tower. There's a breach ult that if you do from underpass, you pretty much get the entire bomb site, including tower, at least a little bit of it. If you have a KJ ult, you can't even play on site. So if they have pretty much any good ult, playing on the site is like troll. You might go for like a kill and then peace out. Or you might actually try to go aggression and take the aggressive space before they can go for the execute. But with that idea in mind, you want to play a passive B setup. But otherwise, if they don't have hard ults like that and you think you can kind of rat your way on site and getting kills, it is advised to try to contest the space a little bit. Now, your brim player will almost always be playing a spawn rotate. So if they're playing canteen and they're going to smoke B main and arcade, I saw Knights do a mid-site smoke here. I don't know if it's good or not, but I haven't seen it. But basically your brim will do one of these two smokes or both, and then molly one of the chokes. And then that will, because the brim molly lasts so long, that kind of disrupts the split and it allows you to focus a little bit more and keep the enemy players in tower. This smoke actually, to counter the tower split, can be pretty good. I forgot about that one. This one's actually pretty good. But if you're looking to play on site and hold it, your brim smokes and molly is pretty crucial to that. And this guy ideally wants to run out to help your site player. So if that's not happening, or if your site player is like pieced out in spawn, you're probably purely just playing for retake at that point, because you're playing a 2-bomb site. Now, if you're playing a 3-bomb site here, and you're playing like a more passive A, that happens sometimes. Like you could play your chamber. I don't even know if this is his trip, by the way. I don't think so. Oh yeah, his trip's here. So if you have your chamber A, I'm skipping a little bit, but this setup is good too. You play your chamber A, his trip is dropped. Notice how it's in range for the little A main fight. Some people actually put the trip here so people can't crouch up under it. Regardless, you have your trip drop, your chamber fights A main, and then your breach sets up your chamber, and then everyone else plays 3B. This is also a really good setup because it allows you to actually hold down B site because you have more numbers. And then your sentinel can, like, you don't even need a drop player in this case. So both setups are great. I think it's a little bit more common to heavy contest A main. And if your sentinel is on A, which was traditionally Killjoy and Cypher before, you wouldn't really contest A main with your sentinel. But chamber is kind of like that hybrid here, which it does make to kind of do it here. So I do think chamber is going to be the meta pick, at least for ranked on this map, for that reason.
What does post plant look like for the B retake then?
It is difficult. So ideally what happens is you have a flank somewhere. If you're all retaking from spawn, you're almost guaranteed to lose the retake unless you have like really good ults or like number advantage, or you're really early on the tap. But normally what that means is, like, let's say you did have that 3 set up. We're going to move the chamber back over here. Kind of getting into this. Maybe your chamber gets some kills and whatever, but if they all take B space, your Raze actually might consider going aggro here and pushing with, say, one more player, and then they can double flank B main while these guys are slow clearing spawn and holding for the pushes. And then if you get to this position, maybe this guy died, you're in a 2v or like a 4v4. Now you don't have to worry about smoking off B main, so you can use your resources to block off the right side of site here. Let me just draw a rectangle, like this side of site, use all your util to block that off, and then you can kind of retake this side and then get on the bomb. And that makes it a lot easier. The inverse is true too. So if you decided to push out drop off rip, this would probably happen more if you have a fade because you can do the deep haunt. But whatever the case may be, let's just say you took drop here and you flank this way. Then now you clear arcade and all of that stuff, and then you just take arcade and tower, and then you just don't really worry about B main. So flanking is huge on the retake, but sometimes it's not possible. So if you can't do that, then you're trying to just flat out spawn together, spam util, and then hope you win the trades. If they're stuck in tower and behind your arcade util, it's kind of possible to get a pretty good retake off.
Okay, A site then. How are we defending A? Are we really trying to fight for A main control? And what happens when we lose it?
So the default recommendation is to fight A main control. You don't actually see it happen every single round in Radiant lobbies, because they kind of have like a feel for when they will fight it or not. Because like once you condition it a few times, the defenders are like, okay, we're not there. They know we fight A main, so why would they fight A main? So they're gonna go somewhere else. But normally you do traditionally fight A main. So start with the stun, start with the smoke, set up your teammate on the line, ideally a raise or a chamber op or something like that. And you just fight here. One player plays anti, and then one, like your third A player, will probably rotate off or just spot your drop. That's normally the setup. But if you're not playing for Sands, or sorry, A main, or they push you off, normally what happens is your A main players will fall back into site. So let's just get rid of the chamber here. Your Sands player, if they didn't drop out of tower, will just fall back and then go towards spawn side. Normally your tower player should drop though, but let's go through both examples. Let's say they go spawn, and then this is your setup here. Ideally what's happening is that your smokes are coming out main to delay, and maybe a sand smoke here, and then this will allow your breach to kind of come out and assist your raise. So the smokes is kind of important here. But let's say the A main smoke comes down and your breach fall decks here. He might still have util to get through the smoke, and then he would fight Sands from this point. Somewhat worried about drop, maybe you would have a smoke drop or something. That's normally what happens.
I have a question here for playing on A main. It feels kind of miserable playing on site. You just don't have that many options. Are you happy to be playing on site here, or is playing on site really just a last resort because you got pushed off A main?
It is a last resort. What I saw Xander do is instead of playing on site, he would just smoke A main and sit into this. You see this little slant here?
Yeah.
This is kind of where he would play. And of course this means that you need someone to cover your drop. But at least this way you kind of just avoid most of the A main util. Yeah. And most people when they come out of the A main smoke, they look to the right or directly in front, but they never look to the left, at least not close left.
Yeah.
So you might be able to get some cheese kills here. But yes, playing on site does feel kind of bad. It's like a last resort.
And so what does typical post plant look like here? Because in a typical post plant, you've got the bomb in this corner, you've got a smoke here, probably have like 2 to 3 people, even once you killed the guys on site. Like let's say you've been able to util dump on site and cleared outside. You've got 2 or 3 guys spamming through the smoke here. How are you supposed to deal with that? Are you trying to split A main through sand to try to clear that out? Or are you just trying to clear site and then deal with A main?
So normally the recommendation I have is take Sands first as your retake, and then from there,
like Sands into A main or just Sands?
Sands into A main ideally is the best thing, but you kind of have to read their ultimates. So sometimes you can just take Sands and then pressure A main, but actually don't push it. But now these guys are uncomfortable. But basically you do need to contest A main to some extent, and then everyone else kind of just runs this way while some A main pressure happens. So that would be ideal scenario. Like if you were to do it in steps, it would be Sands first, A main second, and then now you would pinch the site as if you're an attacker. And that kind of has that flank effect on if you push through B and flanked A main, which would also make this retake easier. But A main control is key on this A retake. Occasionally, you will have a B flank from drop as well, which makes it a little bit easier too, because then you can actually just ignore A main and then full pinch site, and then now you try to just win if they're not playing spam, or you take site really quickly because this drop player allows you not to worry about it, and then you might actually start pushing through the smoke or something.
And then typical smokes on retake are where?
So there's a typical is A main drop, or A main and drop.
Yeah.
But a cool one that you can do if you play Clove is actually top site, because it gets rid of that top side angle and the bottom side angle. If they were to peek
If
into
they're
you.
on bottom side, it ends up being like kind of like a one-way, isn't it?
Yeah, so it does suck if the smoke lasts too long. So if you're a brim, you might want to pre-fire it, so it like fades by the time you're getting close to the bomb, because you don't really want to give defenders a smoke to play in when you're close to the site. You just want to stop them from peeking you. So that could be one. But yeah, most of the time you just do your standards here, drop in A main.
Okay. Are there any eco strategies we should be using on defense?
Tower shotgun stuff is pretty common.
Yeah.
I would say
5 people in there with shorties.
you probably get away with it. Sands is also a pretty hot topic place for shotguns. I actually vividly remember playing against Daznarth where he was playing a judge right next to this door and aced us. That was sad. So you can play shotgun sands or you can play shotgun tower. Yeah. It's somewhat common, but not really, to play like this little arcade box with shotguns, or something of that nature. Okay. But the two main ones are tower and sands.
Was there anything we didn't talk about for this map? We should have.
I think we covered everything. Maybe just one tip for defenders.
Yeah.
Is taking the rope. So, let's say like you're flanking here, and then you get hit by a trip here. Instead of falling all the way back, it doesn't really make sense. Just take the rope and then flank again.
Yeah.
Attackers is true too. If you show a lot on one side here, but you have one player here holding the space, you could just like create map pressure here and then take the rope, and then it's really hard for defenders to get info on which lane you are. Mm-hmm. So if you can kind of just abuse that and just go rope.
If you have someone sitting middle, like if you have a defender sitting middle, can you hear them on the rope?
So I never actually tested this in a custom, so maybe someone can, but the answer is no. So from my understanding is, if you shift walk and take like shift on the entrance and exit of the rope, but you make full noise during the rope, they actually don't hear you. They only can hear the exit and the entry. Now, that's what I've heard. Like I said, I've never tested it, but that's kind of what I do.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us for this walkthrough of Fracture. We hope this gives you some confidence going into this map, because it's really different than the other maps in the rotation. And as always, we so appreciate you listening and so appreciate your support.
Appreciate you guys.
Join the TVL Tent community, Ko-fi.com/thisvalorantlife. All proceeds go towards a scholarship for people to work with Adam Dopai on this podcast. So thanks everyone.